I don't want your money, and I sure as hell don't want your name. I just need 4 walls and a roof until the storm passes, and I'm asking you, not begging you." The woman standing on Cole Mercer's porch had mud on her boots, fire in her eyes, and absolutely nothing left to lose. And in 6 years of keeping every living soul at arm's length, no one had ever looked at him quite like that. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1887 came to northern Montana like a debt collector, hot, relentless, and without a single ounce of mercy. Cole Mercer had been awake since 4 in the morning, which was not unusual. Sleep was something he tolerated rather than enjoyed, a concession to biology rather than comfort. He had ridden the north fence line before sunrise, eaten alone in the kitchen, while his foreman Hank Briggs outlined the week's work, and by 9 o'clock he had already reviewed the cattle records, signed 3 purchase agreements, and refused 2 social invitations from women in Dillon Creek, who believed that persistence was a virtue. It was not. Cole was 38 years old, the wealthiest cattle baron in Beaverhead County, and the most deliberately unavailable man in the Montana Territory. Blackstone Ridge. His ranch sprawled across 14,000 acres of summer gold grassland and shadow blue mountain, and he ran it with the precision of a military operation and the warmth of a January blizzard. The hands respected him. The townspeople admired him from a careful distance. Women had tried. Lord, they had tried, and every single one of them had walked away from Blackstone Ridge with her pride intact and her hopes quietly folded and set aside. He preferred it that way. 6 years ago, a woman named Charlotte Pierce had taken everything he'd been foolish enough to offer: his name, his trust, his plans for a life that meant something, and she had handed it back to him in pieces, each one smaller than the last, until there was nothing left but the lesson. He had learned it thoroughly. He did not intend to unlearn it. By mid-morning, the heat was pressing down on the valley like a flat iron, and Cole had moved to the study to work through the land survey documents that his attorney had sent up from Helena. He was mid-sentence in a letter of response when Hank knocked twice and opened the door without waiting. "Boss," Hank said, "you're going to want to come to the front. I'm in the middle of something." "I know it. Come anyway." Cole looked up. Hank Briggs was not a man who used unnecessary words, and the look on his face was not alarm exactly. It was something closer to bafflement, which was rarer and therefore more interesting. Cole set down his pen. The woman was standing on the porch. She was not what he expected. He had not expected anyone, which was already one surprise. She was perhaps 30 or close to it, with dark hair plastered to the side of her face from what must have been a hard ride in the early heat. Her dress had once been respectable gray linen, good quality, but it had been mended at the left sleeve, and it was streaked now with road dust and something that looked like dried creek water. She was carrying a leather satchel over one shoulder and holding it with both hands, not clutching it in distress, but gripping it with the deliberate steadiness of someone who had made peace with being tired. She did not look desperate. That was the first thing that surprised him. She looked decided. Cole stepped onto the porch and said nothing. He had found over the years that silence was the most efficient tool he owned. Most people filled it immediately with whatever they actually meant, saving everyone a great deal of time. This woman let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "My name is Evelyn Hart. I was married to Thomas Hart, who ran the Twin Elk spread down near Forsyth until he died 14 months ago. I'm not here because I heard you're rich, and I'm not here because someone told me you might be looking for company. I'm here because I've got a fraudulent lien filed against my property by a man named Victor Hale. I've got $43 to my name, and I need somewhere to stay while I build a legal case that will take him apart piece by piece. I can cook, I can keep books, I can manage a supply ledger, and I can work. I'm asking for shelter and honest work in exchange for honest labor, nothing else." Cole studied her. "Who told you to come here?" he asked. "Margaret Aldous in Dillon Creek. She said you were the only man in the county who wouldn't try to turn a woman's trouble into an obligation. Margaret Aldous talks too much. She also said that." A pause. "Are you going to let me stand here in the heat, or are we going to have a real conversation?" Behind him, he heard Hank make a sound that was almost certainly a suppressed laugh, quickly converted into a cough. Cole looked at her for a long moment. He had turned away women with tears. He had turned away women with charm. He had turned away women with connections, and women with beauty, and women with the particular kind of calculated warmth that he recognized and despised. He had never turned away a woman who looked at him the way this one did, as though she was not asking for mercy at all, just making a reasonable business proposition and waiting for a reasonable response. "Come inside," he said. "We'll talk." Hank brought water and then made himself scarce with the efficiency of a man who understood that his continued employment depended on his ability to read a room. Evelyn sat across from Cole at the kitchen table and laid her satchel on the surface between them as though establishing a boundary. She did not take off her hat. "Victor Hale," Cole said. "I know that name. Most people in the territory do. He buys distressed properties at fraudulent prices, and he does it by filing liens that have no legal basis, waiting for the owner to run out of money, fighting them, and then making an offer when the owner has no choice but to accept." She said it without heat, without drama, as though she were reading from a ledger. "He filed a lien against Twin Elk 3 months after Thomas died, claiming Thomas had borrowed $4,000 from Hale's lending company in 1884. Thomas never borrowed a cent from anyone in his life. I have his records. Every transaction, every payment, every note. But the lien is in the county register, and my attorney in Forsyth says fighting it will take 6 months and money I don't have." Why Dillon Creek? Because Victor Hale has relationships with 3 judges in Forsyth County and none here. And because Beaverhead County has a land court session in September. And if I can establish legal residence and file a proper counterclaim, I have a better chance of a fair hearing. Cole watched her. She was not nervous. She was not performing calm. She simply was calm the way a person is calm when they have already processed every fear available to them and come out the other side. "You came to a stranger's ranch," he said. "That's a risk. I did my research before I came. You have a reputation for being cold, but not cruel. There's a difference." She met his eyes. "I also know you've had trouble with Hale's associates before. Senator Whitmore tried to acquire the eastern parcel of Blackstone Ridge 2 years ago through a surrogate buyer, and you fought it off. That tells me you understand what it means to be targeted by men who think the law belongs to whoever pays for it." Cole was quiet for a moment. She was right, on both counts. "You said you can keep books," he said. "I kept every financial record for Twin Elk for 8 years. Thomas handled the cattle. I handled everything else." She reached into her satchel and produced a small bound journal. "This is a sample. You can look at it." He took it. The ledger was meticulous column entries in a small precise hand date referenced cross-indexed, not a single erasure. He turned 3 pages before he handed it back. "My current bookkeeper is leaving at the end of the month," Cole said. "He's going back to Ohio. I've been interviewing replacements." Evelyn said nothing. She waited. "The bunkhouse is not appropriate," he said. "There's a small room off the cookhouse. It's clean. You'd have privacy." He paused. "I'll give you room board and a fair wage in exchange for the books and whatever else needs doing. You keep your legal work separate from your duties here, and you don't bring your trouble onto this ranch unless it comes looking for you." "Understood. And I want no misunderstanding about what this is," Cole said. "This is an employment arrangement, nothing more." Evelyn looked at him with an expression he could not quite categorize, something between amusement and respect. Weighted slightly toward respect. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I buried my husband 14 months ago, and I've spent every day since fighting a man who thinks a woman with a dead husband is the easiest target in the territory. I did not ride 40 miles in July heat to find a husband. I came to find ground to stand on, that's all." Cole stood up. "Hank will show you the room." He walked back to his study and sat down at his desk and tried to return to the survey letter. He found after several minutes that he had read the same sentence 4 times and had not retained a single word of it. By the second day, 3 things had happened that Cole had not anticipated. The first was that Evelyn had found an error in the June supply ledger within 2 hours of sitting down with it, a $40 discrepancy in the feed account that Cole's outgoing bookkeeper had apparently missed for 3 consecutive months. She had not announced it dramatically. She had simply left a note on his desk with the relevant page numbers and a single-line feed account, June-August pages, 14, 22, and 31. Worth a conversation with whoever handles supply orders. The second was that she had, without being asked, reorganized the cookhouse storage in a manner that his cook, an old crow man named Joseph, who had worked at Blackstone Ridge for 11 years and tolerated no interference in his domain, had not only permitted but apparently welcomed. Cole had walked past the cookhouse door and heard the two of them talking about the best way to preserve summer vegetables, and Joseph had laughed. Actually laughed a sound Cole heard perhaps twice a year. The third was that she had been up before him. He discovered this on the second morning when he walked to the stable at 4:30 and found that someone had already fed the horses. He stood in the stable doorway with his coffee and looked at the full water troughs and the clean-swept floor and experienced a feeling he could not immediately name. It was not gratitude exactly. It was something more unsettling, the sensation of having your habits made visible by the fact that someone had matched them. He asked Hank about it. She was up at 4. Hank said with the careful neutrality of a man who had opinions he was choosing not to share. She doesn't need to be doing stable work. I told her that. She said she couldn't sleep and needed something useful to do. A pause. I also told her the feed room could use reorganizing, and she had it done inside of 40 minutes. Cole said nothing. She asked me about the Hale situation, Hank added. I told her what I knew. And she listened real careful, didn't say much, but she had this look. Hank searched for the word. Like she was putting things in order in her head. Like she was already 3 steps ahead. Cole walked away before Hank could interpret his expression, which he suspected was giving away more than he intended. On the 4th day, Evelyn found him in the study after supper. She knocked. That was the first thing. She knocked and waited and came in only when he answered. Most of his household had stopped knocking years ago. He had not noticed until now that he had missed it. I've been through the full ledger, she said. Can I show you something? She spread 3 pages of notes across his desk. Her own handwriting organized into a clear column structure. She had not just corrected the discrepancy she'd found on day 1. She had traced it back through the supply chain and identified the pattern, a gradual incremental inflation of supply costs that suggested his current supplier was padding invoices by a small enough margin to avoid easy detection, but consistently enough that over 2 years it amounted to nearly $900. Cole looked at the numbers, then he looked at her. How long did this take you? He asked. 3 evenings, she said. I kept your regular work current. This was separate. You did this on your own time. You're letting me live here, she said, as though that settled the matter entirely. Cole picked up her notes and read through them again more slowly. Every figure was cited. Every inference was supported. The conclusion was airtight, and the recommendation was practical. Terminate the current supplier agreement request, 3 competing bids, and file a formal dispute for the overages. I'll take this to my attorney, he said. You'll want to be there when I do. Evelyn looked surprised. It was the first time he had seen her look anything other than composed, and it lasted only a moment. That's not necessary, she said. It's your money. Your work, he said. Your name should be on it. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Cole, he said. He was not sure why he said it. The word came out before the thought completed itself. He had not invited anyone to use his first name in a very long time. Evelyn looked at him steadily for a moment. Thank you, Cole, she said. Good night. She left. He sat at his desk for a long time after looking at her notes, not reading them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, and it changed everything. Hank brought it in from the weekly mail run, with a look on his face that Cole recognized the particular careful stillness of a man delivering bad news, while trying not to look like he was delivering bad news. Cole took the envelope, saw the return address, a law office in Helena, with a name he recognized as associated with Senator Whitmore's political interests, and felt the familiar specific cold that settled into his chest when trouble came wearing a legal suit. He read it twice. Then he walked to the cookhouse and knocked on the door of the small room where Evelyn Hart was working on the supply ledger corrections. She looked up. She read his face the way he had begun to notice she read everything quickly, accurately, and without performance. "What happened?" she said. He handed her the letter without speaking. She read it once. Her face went very still. Then she read it again, and when she set the letter down on the desk, her hands were flat and steady. The letter informed Cole Mercer that a legal claim had been filed in Helena County on behalf of a consortium of investors represented by Senator Elliott Whitmore, asserting a right of prior purchase on the southeastern parcel of Blackstone Ridge based on an 1879 land grant agreement. The claim asserted that Cole's title to the parcel was subordinate to the grant. It gave him 30 days to respond. "He's moving on two fronts," Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet and perfectly level. "Hale is coming after me, and Whitmore is coming after you, at the same time. You think they're connected?" She looked at him. Victor Hale was a business associate of Senator Whitmore's starting in 1881. I found that in the Helena Gazette archives when I was building my case. A pause. "I think they're not coming after us separately. I think we were never separate targets." Cole sat down. He looked at the letter. He looked at her. "They want the ranch," he said. "They want the water rights attached to the ranch," she said. "If Whitmore gets the southeastern parcel, he controls the creek access. And if Hale gets Twin Elk, he controls the southern grazing corridor." She paused. "Together, those two things give them leverage over every small rancher between here and Forsyth," Cole finished. The silence in the room was the kind that arrives after two people realize they are looking at the same thing from the same angle and seeing it the same way. It was not comfortable. It was something more than comfortable. It was useful. "I need to send a wire to my attorney in Helena tonight," Cole said. "And I need you to tell me everything you have on Hale. Every document, every date, every name." "I'll get my records," Evelyn said. She did not say "I told you so." She did not say "I'm sorry to bring this to your door." She simply stood up, opened her trunk, and began pulling out the files she had been carrying for 14 months. Careful, dated, organized, and she laid them on the desk between them, like a hand of cards she had been waiting for the right moment to play. Cole pulled his chair up to the desk. They worked until past midnight, and neither one of them suggested stopping. It was Hank who saw it first, or rather, who said it first. He caught Cole alone in the stable on Thursday morning, 3 days after the letter, and said without preamble, "She's good, boss." "I know," Cole said. "No, I mean—" Hank paused, choosing words with care. "I've been here 11 years. I've never seen you sit down with anybody at a desk like that, working, talking it through like—" Another pause. "Like a partner." "It's a practical situation," Cole said. "Sure it is," Hank said with the tone of a man who believed no such thing. Cole looked at him. "I'm not saying anything," Hank said, holding up both hands. "I'm just saying, she's good." Cole walked out of the stable, but the word stayed with him the rest of the morning, following him through the heat and the work and the long silences of Blackstone Ridge. Partner. He had not used that word in 6 years. He had not allowed himself to think it. And now Hank had said it in a stable on a Thursday morning, and Cole could not figure out how to put it back where it came from. That evening, Evelyn was on the porch with a cup of tea and a copy of the Beaverhead County land records, cross-referencing something in her notebook with a pencil, and the focused quiet of a woman who was used to doing hard work alone and had never expected anyone to notice. Cole sat down in the other chair. She glanced at him, then back at her records. "The 1879 land grant Whitmore is referencing," she said without looking up. "I found the original filing. It was for a different parcel. The boundary description was altered sometime between 1879 and 1883, but the original is still in the territorial archives in Helena." Cole was quiet for a moment. "How did you find that?" "I wrote to the archivist 3 weeks ago," she said. "I was building my case against Hale, and I thought—" She paused. "I thought it was worth knowing who Hale was connected to, so I started pulling the thread." Cole looked at her. She was still reading her records pencil, moving occasionally, entirely self-contained. She had pulled the thread on his enemy before she had even arrived at his ranch. She had come here with more than just her own legal defense. She had come with intelligence. He hadn't known he needed assembled quietly, methodically over weeks, because she had understood before he did what was actually at stake. "Evelyn," he said. She looked up. "Why didn't you tell me about the land grant filing when you arrived?" She held his eyes. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you yet," she said. "And because it was mine to hold until I was sure it would be used right." The honesty of it landed in his chest like a clean impact, not painful, but impossible to dismiss. "And now?" he asked. She looked at him for a long, steady moment. The summer evening pressed warm around the porch. Somewhere out past the fence line, one of the hands was whistling something tuneless and far away. "Now I'm sure," she said. She went back to her records. Cole sat in his chair and looked out at the long gold light dying over Blackstone Ridge, and he thought about trust, what it cost, what it meant, and how strangely impossibly a woman with $43 and a satchel full of evidence had made him feel something he had spent 6 years constructing walls against. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. The first faint outline of it pressing against the walls in the summer dark. And Cole Mercer, who had kept every door of Blackstone Ridge closed for 6 long years, did not get up and go inside. He stayed on the porch. He stayed until the light was gone. The wire came back from Helena on a Friday afternoon, and Cole's attorney had 3 words that mattered and a dozen that didn't. The 3 that mattered were original grant found. Cole read it standing at the telegraph office in Dillon Creek, and the first thing he thought was not about the case or the legal strategy or the 9 months of work that finding that document could save. The first thing he thought was Evelyn was right. He folded the wire and put it in his breast pocket and rode back to Blackstone Ridge faster than he needed to, which was something he did not examine too carefully. She was in the study when he got back, working at the secondary desk. He had moved in from the spare room 3 days earlier without comment, because she had been balancing his ledgers on a stack of books at the kitchen table, and that was inefficient, and he did not run an inefficient operation. She looked up when he came in and read his face the same way she always did, fast, accurate, no wasted motion. "They found it," she said. "It wasn't a question. Every word you said it would be. Original boundary description, 1879. Different parcel entirely." He handed her the wire. "My attorney says with that document and the altered filing, Whitmore's claim collapses before it reaches the land court." Evelyn read the wire once, set it down. And then she did something he hadn't seen her do yet. She closed her eyes for 3 full seconds and let out a slow breath. And in that breath was 14 months of fighting, of being alone with the weight of everything, of holding herself together by sheer force of will. Just 3 seconds. Then she opened her eyes, and she was composed again. But he had seen it. "That's Whitmore neutralized," she said. "Which means Hale loses his political cover." She looked at the wire again. "He's going to move faster now. If he hears about this, and he'll try to force a settlement before we can bring the counterclaim." "Then we move faster," Cole said. "I need to get to the land court clerk before Hale's people do. If I can file the counterclaim this week, I'll ride with you." Evelyn stopped. She looked at him with an expression that was careful and a little uncertain, which was rare enough to notice. "You don't have to do that. I know I don't." Cole sat down across from her. "You're not the only one with a stake in this anymore. If Hale and Whitmore are running a coordinated operation, my land records, my witness accounts of the supply fraud, and my attorney's name on your filing will carry weight. Yours alone might not." He paused. "That's not a statement about your credibility. It's a statement about how this territory works, and we both know it." She looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but something settling like a door coming level in its frame. "Monday morning," she said. "I want to be at the clerk's office when it opens." "Monday morning," he said. Sunday evening. Hank came to Cole in the stable with a look that meant company was coming that Cole hadn't invited. "2 men rode in off the South Road about an hour ago," Hank said. "Asked for water and left. But one of them had a Hale Land and Lending letterhead on a paper sticking out of his coat pocket. I saw it when he leaned down to check his horse." Cole was quiet for a moment. "They're scouting." "That's what I figured. Wanted you to know before morning." Cole thought about Evelyn in the cookhouse room, her files organized in 3 stacks on the small desk, 14 months of work laid out in order. Everything she needed to dismantle Victor Hale's fraudulent claim, sitting 12 feet from where she slept. "She doesn't need to know tonight," he said. "Tell the night hand to keep an eye on the south road, and make sure the gate latch on the main fence is locked." "Already done," Hank said. Cole nodded. He stood in the stable for a moment after Hank left and thought about what it meant that Hale had sent men to look at Blackstone Ridge. It meant Hale knew Evelyn was here. It meant Hale knew Cole was involved. And it meant that whatever timeline they had been working against had just gotten shorter. He made a decision in that moment that surprised him slightly. Not the decision itself, but how quickly it came and how certain it felt. He was not going to let Victor Hale walk onto his land into his county and take apart the work this woman had done. Not because she had come to him for help. Because she had been right about everything from the first day, and she had earned something better than what was coming for her if Cole stepped back and let it come. He walked to the cookhouse and knocked on her door. She answered quickly, which meant she hadn't been sleeping either. "Tomorrow night," he said. "Not Monday morning. We leave tomorrow night and we're in Dillon Creek before dawn. I want the filing done before Hale's men can get a wire to Helena." Evelyn looked at him. He could see her reading the decision in his face, what it meant, what had changed. "They've already been here," she said. "2 men. South Road. They're gone." She nodded once, not surprised, not frightened, already adjusting. "I'll have everything ready by 8 o'clock. 7, he said. 7, she agreed. He turned to go, and she said, "Cole." He stopped. "Thank you," she said. Not the way she'd said it before, politely at a distance. She said it like she meant it, which was different, and he felt the difference land somewhere in the space behind his sternum and stay there. 7 o'clock, he said, and walked back to the house. They rode out before the dark lifted and arrived in Dillon Creek, with the first pale edge of light coming up over the eastern ridge. Evelyn had her satchel across her saddle, and she rode with the same steadiness. She did everything, not showy, not struggling, just present and capable, and entirely her own. The land court clerk was a man named Abner Walsh, who had held the position for 19 years and had the expression of someone who had learned to be surprised by nothing. Cole knocked on the courthouse door at 7:42 in the morning, and Abner Walsh answered in his shirt sleeves with a cup of coffee and a look of mild annoyance that shifted to something more attentive when he saw who was knocking. "Mr. Mercer," he said. "Morning, Abner. We need to file a counterclaim before office hours. I know that's irregular." Walsh looked from Cole to Evelyn and back. "You know I can't accept filings before—" "I know," Cole said. "I'm asking you to make an exception, and I'm asking you to date the filing as of this moment, not when the office opens. The reason is that a party hostile to this claim may attempt to file a preemptive document this morning, and I want the record to show we were first." Walsh considered this for a long moment. He was not a political man, and he was not a dishonest one, which was why Cole had chosen to come to him at 7:42 in the morning instead of waiting. "Come in," Walsh said finally. "I want to see the documents before I agree to anything." Evelyn sat across from Abner Walsh at his desk, and she walked him through 14 months of documentation in 22 minutes. Cole watched Walsh's expression change as she spoke, the polite attention becoming actual attention, the mild skepticism becoming something that looked like professional respect. She was not performing. She was not appealing to his sympathy. She was presenting a legal case the way a lawyer would, clear and supported and airtight, and by the time she finished, Walsh had his stamp in his hand before she asked for it. "I'm going to accept this filing," Walsh said, "and I'm going to note in the record that it was received at 7:54 in the morning on account of the exceptional circumstances described by the claimant." He looked at her. "Mrs. Hart, wherever you got your legal training." 14 months of necessity, she said. Walsh stamped the counterclaim. "That'll do it," he said. Cole felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying since Friday, since the scouting riders, since the moment he'd understood that Hale was moving on both of them at once. He looked at Evelyn, and she was looking at the stamped document in her hands with an expression he recognized now, those 3 seconds of internal quiet, the breath behind the composure. Then she looked up and met his eyes, and the look between them said something that neither of them put into words, because neither of them was ready to yet. Jabab. They had breakfast at the only cafe in Dillon Creek that was open before 9, a narrow place called Maze with good coffee and bad light, and 3 old ranchers at the counter who recognized Cole and pretended they weren't watching him eat breakfast with a woman they'd never seen before. Cole ignored them. Evelyn seemed unaware of them, or perhaps she was aware, and had simply decided they weren't worth her attention, which amounted to the same thing. Hale will hear about the filing by midday, she said, cutting her toast. He'll want to make a move before the September court session. His options are limited now, Cole said. The Whitmore connection collapses without the land grant fraud. That takes away his political leverage. He still has the original fraudulent lien, she said. And he still has whatever he's willing to do outside of legal channels. She said it the way she said most things, factually, without drama, naming the thing directly, rather than dancing around it. Cole looked at her. Has he threatened you directly? Once, she said. 3 weeks after Thomas died. A man came to Twin Elk and told me that Mr. Hale was prepared to be very generous if I chose to sell voluntarily, and that it would be... She paused, choosing the word carefully. Inadvisable to pursue other options. What did you say? The edge of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, something drier. I asked him to leave my property and told him that if Mr. Hale had something to say to me, he could put it in writing, and I would respond through my attorney. You had an attorney then? I did not, she said. But he didn't know that. Cole set down his coffee. He looked at this woman sitting across from him in a narrow cafe at 8 in the morning, having just outmaneuvered a corrupt land speculator with 19 years of legal experience behind him, and he thought about the word Hank had used. Partner. He thought about Charlotte, about the specific shape of the mistake he had made 6 years ago, the way he had trusted too fast, loved too fast, opened too many doors before he understood what was behind them. He had told himself the lesson was to keep the doors closed. He was beginning to wonder if the lesson was something more specific than that. Something more like, know who you're opening the door to. Cole, Evelyn said. He realized he had been looking at her too long. He picked up his coffee. I want to ask you something, she said. And you don't have to answer. Ask. Margaret Aldous told me you were a fair man, but a closed one. That something happened 6 years ago, and you haven't let anyone close since. She held his gaze. I'm not asking what it was. I'm asking... A pause, small and careful. Is the door closed because of what happened, or because you decided it should stay closed? The cafe was quiet, except for the low conversation at the counter, and the sound of May moving around in the back. Cole held Evelyn's eyes and thought about lying, a polite deflection, a redirection, something easier than the truth. He had gotten very good at those in 6 years. They came naturally now, like old reflexes. He did not use one. Both, he said. For a long time they felt like the same thing. Evelyn nodded. She didn't push. She picked up her coffee and looked at the window, and he understood that she was giving him space, the same way he had given her space instinctively without being asked. For what it's worth, she said, still looking at the window. I didn't come here looking to change anything about you. I came looking for ground to stand on. A pause. I'm aware that I may have complicated things. You've been here 12 days, he said. She looked back at him. I know. And you found a $900 supply fraud, identified a coordinated land grab involving a sitting senator, outmaneuvered a corrupt lender, and got a land court clerk to accept a filing 40 minutes before office hours. Yes, she said. You've complicated things, he said. I'll allow it. She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, a real one, brief and unguarded, and it changed her face entirely, and he had to look away from it, because the alternative was staring, and he was not a man who stared. They were halfway back to Blackstone Ridge when they saw the rider coming south on the main road. Cole recognized him before he was close enough to speak. Pete Dolan, one of his hands riding harder than the morning heat justified. Cole raised a hand, and Pete pulled up in a spray of dust, his horse blowing. Boss, Pete said. Man came to the ranch about an hour after you left. Said he had a message for the woman. Wouldn't leave it with Hank. Said it had to go to her personal. Cole looked at Evelyn. Her face was still. Who was he? Cole asked. Didn't give a name. Dressed too clean for a ranch hand, not clean enough for a lawyer. He waited 20 minutes and then left. But Pete hesitated. He walked the perimeter of the front yard before he left, real deliberate. Hank said it felt like he was measuring something. Evelyn's jaw tightened, just slightly. Cole saw it. He'll come back, she said. Her voice was level. That wasn't a message delivery. That was a warning. He wanted Hank to see him measuring the yard. Hale's telling you he knows where you are, Cole said. And that he's not afraid of who you are, she said, looking at Cole. Her eyes were steady, but there was something behind them. Not fear, but the recognition of fear, the awareness of it, held at arm's length by sheer discipline. I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd move this fast. You filed this morning, Cole said. He found out faster than we expected. I should... She stopped. Started again. If my being here puts your ranch at risk... Stop, Cole said. She stopped. You're not leaving, he said. Not a question, not an offer. A statement delivered with the same flat certainty he used for decisions about the ranch fencing water rights cattle movements. The same tone, and he heard it as he said it, and did not take it back. Hale wants you isolated and without resources. That's how he wins. You stay. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her face that she didn't try to hide, relief pure and unguarded, just for a second before she pulled it back. All right, she said, quietly. All right. They rode back to Blackstone Ridge and said nothing for most of it, which was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that exists between people who have moved past the need to fill space with words, the kind that only builds between people who have started without planning to trust each other. That evening, Cole called his full crew together, all 11 hands, Hank, Joseph, and Pete, in the main barn. Evelyn stood off to the side. She had not asked to be included, and she had not asked to be excluded, which meant she simply waited to see what he would do. He included her. You've all seen or heard about the man who came this morning, Cole said. His name, or the name of the man he works for, is Victor Hale. Some of you may know the name. He's a land speculator out of Helena, who acquires properties through fraudulent liens and political manipulation, and he is currently attempting to do that to both Mrs. Hart and to Blackstone Ridge. He paused. I want every man on this crew to understand what that means practically. It means this ranch may have unwanted visitors. It means we keep the gates secured and we keep track of strangers on the road. It means you report anything unusual to Hank immediately, and you do not engage anyone you don't recognize without Hank or me present. One of the younger hands, a 22-year-old from Wyoming named Davis, who had opinions too large for his experience, said, Are we in trouble, boss? We're in a legal dispute, Cole said. There's a difference. We handle it through the courts, not with confrontation, but we handle it with our eyes open. He looked around the group. Any questions? Nobody had questions. They filed out, and when they were gone, Evelyn said, You didn't have to tell them my name. They needed context, he said. And you're not a secret. She looked at him. Some men would have left me out of that entirely. Some men would have, he agreed. She was quiet a moment. Then, your crew respects you. They're good men, he said. They deserve straight information. You run this place like a family, she said. It wasn't criticism. It was observation, careful and genuine the way she said most things. Not like a business, a family. Cole looked at the empty barn, at the space where 11 men had been standing. He had not thought about it in those terms before, but he found he couldn't argue with it. Thomas ran Twin Elk that way, he asked. He tried to, she said. There was grief in it, brief and controlled, a splinter of it showing through the composure quickly covered. He was a good man, not a strategic one. That's why Hale came for us. Because good men who trust people are easy targets. Because good men who trust people don't see the pattern until it's too late. She looked at him. You see patterns. I've had reasons to learn how, he said. The lamp between them threw long shadows across the barn floor, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The evening settled around Blackstone Ridge. The hands quiet in the bunkhouse. Joseph's fire low in the cookhouse. The summer dark coming in slow and warm over the Montana Valley. And Cole stood in his barn with a woman who had ridden into his life 12 days ago with $43 and a satchel full of truth. And he thought with a clarity that surprised him that he could not remember the last time he had felt less alone. "I didn't say that," he said. "Get some sleep. We have a response to draft for Hale's attorneys tomorrow, and I want your eyes on the language before it goes." "Good night, Cole," she said. "Good night, Evelyn." She walked across the yard to the cookhouse, and Cole stood in the barn doorway and watched the light come on in her small window and stay on because she was already working, already thinking already. 3 steps ahead, and he leaned against the frame and thought about patterns and trust, and what it meant that the most careful, guarded version of himself had looked at this woman for 12 days and found absolutely nothing to defend against. The light in her window burned steady and long into the night. Cole stayed in the doorway longer than he meant to. And when he finally went inside and sat at his desk, he did not open the legal files. He sat in the quiet and let himself feel what was happening, which was something he had not permitted in a very long time. It was uncomfortable. It was also, he recognized with a kind of reluctant honesty, something he had been missing without knowing exactly what shape the missing thing had. He did not name it yet, but he stopped pretending it wasn't there. The response to Hale's attorneys went out on Wednesday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, Victor Hale himself was in Dillon Creek. Cole heard it from Pete, who had heard it from the feed store owner, who had watched Hale step off the stage with 2 men. Cole didn't recognize, and a lawyer, he did a Helena man named Greer, who had a reputation for winning cases through procedural exhaustion rather than merit. Greer would file motions until the opposing party ran out of money or patience, whichever came first. It was a strategy that worked consistently against people who had limited resources and no one in their corner. Cole had resources, and Evelyn was not a person who ran out of patience. He told her that evening. She was at the desk in the study, which had become without any formal discussion. A shared space, her files on the left side, his on the right, an invisible line between them that both of them respected and neither of them mentioned. She received the news about Hale's arrival, the way she received most things that alarmed her, with a stillness that was not passivity but concentration, like a person gathering themselves before lifting something heavy. "Greer," she said. "I know that name. He filed 3 of Hale's previous acquisitions. 2 of the owners settled inside of 60 days. Because they couldn't sustain the legal cost," Cole said. "We can sustain it," she said. It was the first time she had said "we" that way, not a slip, not an accident, but deliberate, a quiet acknowledgement of what had been building between them for 3 weeks without either of them naming it. Cole noted it and said nothing. "Hale won't come to us directly," she said. "He'll work the town first, talk to the merchants, the local officials, anyone who might have influence over the land court clerk. He'll try to make the environment hostile before he makes a legal move." "Then we talk to the town first," Cole said. She looked up from her files. "What do you mean?" "I've lived in this county for 14 years, he said. "I know these people. Hale doesn't. There's a difference between a man with political connections in Helena and a man with actual relationships in Dillon Creek, and Hale has never understood that distinction." He paused. "Tomorrow morning I want to call on Judge Alderman, the county recorder, and the chairman of the Merchants Association. I want them to hear our version of this before Hale's attorney has a chance to frame it." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, turning it over. "That's not a legal strategy," she said. "No," Cole agreed. "It's a human one, and sometimes that matters more." She looked at him with an expression that had something new in it. Something that was past respect, past professional regard. Something warmer and more personal that she pulled back quickly almost before he saw it. Almost. "I'll have the summary documents ready by 6 in the morning," she said. 5:30, he said. 5:30, she said, and turned back to her files. Judge Alderman received them in his front parlor before breakfast, which said everything about what 14 years of honest dealing in Beaverhead County was worth. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with a white mustache and the slow, deliberate manner of someone who had learned that fast conclusions were usually wrong ones. He listened to Cole for 6 minutes without interrupting, then took Evelyn's summary document and read it in silence for another 4. "Victor Hale," he said, setting the document down. I've seen his name in the territorial land records 3 times in 2 years. Every time there's a widow or an estate involved. He looked at Evelyn directly. Mrs. Hart, your documentation is thorough. I had time to be thorough, she said. 14 months of it. The altered land grant document you have the original confirmed. My attorney in Helena has a certified copy from the Territorial Archives, Cole said. The alteration is documented, the dates are verifiable, and the original surveyor's record contradicts Whitmore's claim at every point. Alderman looked from one to the other. Greer is good, he said. He'll find procedural angles you haven't thought of. We know, Cole said. We're not asking you to prejudge anything. We're asking you to know what we know before Hale's version of events reaches you from a different direction. Alderman was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Evelyn, Thomas Hart's widow. He said it slowly, like he was placing it. Thomas Hart traded cattle with my brother-in-law for 7 years. Honest man. He was, Evelyn said, quietly, firmly, without appeal. Alderman nodded. I appreciate you coming to me directly, he said. That tells me something about how you're choosing to operate. They left his house with nothing promised and everything understood, which was exactly what Cole had hoped for. The county recorder took 20 minutes and 3 cups of coffee and ended with a handshake. The Merchants Association chairman, a cautious Norwegian named Eriksson, took 45 minutes and needed to see 4 separate documents before his expression shifted from guarded to convinced. But when it shifted completely. By noon, Cole and Evelyn had spoken to 9 people who mattered in Dillon Creek, and every one of them had heard the facts from a source they trusted before Hale's attorney had finished his breakfast. They were walking back to where their horses were tied when Evelyn said without looking at him, You did that deliberately. The order. Alderman first because he's the most credible, then the recorder for the official record, then Eriksson because the merchants follow his lead. Yes, Cole said. You planned that before we left this morning. Last night, actually. She was quiet for a moment. You're better at this than I expected, she said. What did you expect? She thought about it honestly. A man who operated on authority, she said. Who used his position instead of his judgment. Authority runs out, Cole said. Judgment doesn't. She looked at him sideways briefly with that expression she had, the one that meant she was recalibrating something in her understanding of him. Some category she'd put him in that he'd just stepped out of. He had started to recognize it. He had started privately to look for it. Victor Hale found them before they reached their horses. He was standing near the telegraph office with his attorney Greer and one of the 2 men who had come with him on the stage, and he stepped into their path with the practiced ease of a man who had made a career of catching people off guard in public spaces, where causing a scene would reflect badly on the person being confronted. Cole had encountered men like Hale before the specific category of person who used surface charm as a weapon, who smiled while calculating who made every aggressive move look like a reasonable conversation. Hale was perhaps 50, well-dressed with a broad open face that was designed to look trustworthy, and succeeded at it superficially. Mr. Mercer, Hale said, extending his hand. I don't believe we've met formally. Victor Hale. Cole looked at the hand, did not take it. I know who you are, he said. Hale withdrew his hand without changing his expression. Good at this then, and turned to Evelyn with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Mrs. Hart, you look well considering. Considering what? Evelyn said. Her voice was perfectly even. Considering the difficulty of your situation, Hale said. I want you to know that's something I've thought a great deal about. A woman in your position, managing a legal dispute of this complexity alone, it's an enormous burden. I've always felt that the original lien matter could have been resolved much more simply, and it's still not too late for that. The original lien is fraudulent, Evelyn said. We filed a counterclaim with the Beaverhead County Land Court on Monday morning. I imagine your attorney has already received notification. Something moved in Hale's face, just a flicker, fast and controlled. He had known about the filing, but he hadn't known she would say it to him directly in the middle of the main street of Dillon Creek, with complete calm. Cole watched Greer the attorney make a small note in the margin of the paper he was holding. That's your prerogative, of course, Hale said. though I'd encourage you to think carefully about the cost of a prolonged legal process. The counterclaim is a complicated instrument, and the September court session. We're aware of the September session, Cole said. We're prepared for it. He looked at Hale with the specific steady attention he used for men who needed to understand they had miscalculated. I'll save us both some time, Mr. Hale. Mrs. Hart is employed at Blackstone Ridge and under my roof and has the full support of my legal representation. The Whitmore land grant claim has been invalidated by the original Territorial Archive document. Your lion against Twin Elk has no factual basis, and the documentation proving that is currently in the hands of 2 attorneys and a territorial archivist. He paused. If you have a legitimate legal argument, make it in court. If you don't, I'd recommend getting back on the stage. Hale looked at him for a long moment. The charm had not dropped. Men like Hale didn't drop the charm because the charm was structural. It held the whole thing together, but something behind it had shifted, a recalculation. You've taken a strong interest in Mrs. Hart's affairs, he said with a specific tone that implied more than the words said. Cole recognized what Hale was doing. An insinuation deployed in public designed to make Evelyn's credibility a personal matter rather than a legal one, to make her position look like dependency rather than competence. It was the oldest play in the book, and it was filthy, and Cole felt something cold and hard move through him. Before he could respond, Evelyn said, Mr. Hale, I managed Twin Elk's finances for 8 years, identified and documented your fraudulent lien without legal training, located the original Territorial Archive document that invalidates your partner's land claim, and filed a counterclaim in a county where you have no political relationships. I did all of that on $43 and a borrowed horse. She looked at him with the absolute directness that was her particular brand of devastation. Mr. Mercer offered me a job because I'm competent. If you're implying otherwise, you're welcome to say so clearly so I can add it to the record. The street was not crowded, but it was not empty either. 3 men outside the hardware store had stopped talking. May from the cafe was standing in her doorway. Erickson, the Merchants Association chairman they had spoken to 2 hours ago, was visible through the window of his office directly across the street. Hale looked at Evelyn. He looked at the street. He understood what was happening, that this conversation was being witnessed, that everything she had just said was being heard by exactly the kind of people whose opinion would matter in September, and that he had walked into a situation he had not fully mapped. I look forward to the court proceedings, he said with a smile that cost him something, and walked away. Greer followed without speaking. The third man glanced back once, and then didn't. Cole and Evelyn stood on the street and didn't move until Hale was out of sight. Then Evelyn let out a slow breath, not the 3-second private kind she allowed herself when she thought no one was watching, but a full breath, almost shaky at the edges, the kind that comes when your body reminds you that it was afraid, even when your voice wasn't. Cole said quietly enough that only she could hear, "That was the bravest thing I've seen in a long time." Evelyn looked straight ahead. "I was terrified," she said, just as quietly. "I know," he said. "That's what makes it brave." She turned and looked at him, and something in her face was open in a way it hadn't been before. Not vulnerable exactly, but uncovered the composure still there. But thinner, and behind it, a person who was tired and fighting and had just held herself together in public for the 100th time, and was not entirely sure how many more times she had left. "Can we go home?" she said. The word home landed in the air between them, and she heard it. He saw her hear it, and a faint color came into her face. "Yes," Cole said. He didn't remark on the word. He filed it in the same place he'd filed "we" 3 days earlier, and he let it be what it was. They rode back to Blackstone Ridge. The twist came 4 days later, and it came from the last direction Cole had expected. Joseph, his cook, found it. He had been in the habit for 11 years of picking up the mail from the ranch's postbox at the end of the South Lane every morning on his way back from the creek, and he brought it in without looking at it and left it on the kitchen table. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks and 4 days after Evelyn Hart had knocked on Cole Mercer's door, Joseph came into the study where Cole and Evelyn were working and set down a single envelope and said, "This one's got no return address, and it came in with yesterday's mail, not today's. Somebody put it in the box by hand." Cole looked at it. Evelyn looked at it. The envelope had her name on it. Mrs. E. Hart in handwriting neither of them recognized. Cole picked it up. "It's addressed to me," Evelyn said. He handed it to her without hesitation. She opened it carefully, read the single page inside. Her face went through something complicated: confusion, then recognition, then a very controlled version of shock that she was fighting to keep from showing. She handed it to Cole without speaking. It was a letter. No signature, no date. But the contents were specific enough to eliminate any possibility it was fabricated. It detailed in careful and knowledgeable language the internal structure of Hale's lending operation, the names of 3 additional properties he had targeted in the territory, the mechanism by which he had bribed a clerk in the Forsyth County Land Office to alter records, and at the bottom 2 sentences that changed the shape of everything. Thomas Hart's original loan records with Hale Land and Lending were destroyed in March of 1886, not because they didn't exist, but because they did exist and showed repayment in full. The lien is not just fraudulent. It is evidence of deliberate fraud and destruction of legal documents, which is a criminal matter, not a civil one. Evelyn sat very still. Cole read it twice. "Someone inside Hale's operation," he said. "Or someone who was," she said. Her voice was careful. "Someone who knows enough to know the specific dates." She paused. "Thomas made a payment in March of 1886. I have the record." He noted it in his ledger as a final payment on a short-term note, but I assumed it was a different lender because I found no corresponding account with Hale. She stopped. "He borrowed from Hale and paid it back, and Hale destroyed the evidence of repayment to manufacture a debt that didn't exist." Cole looked at her. "This changes the legal classification. This changes everything," she said. And for the first time since she had arrived at Blackstone Ridge, since the day she had stood on his porch with fire in her eyes, and $43 and nothing left to lose. Evelyn Hart's composure broke. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. Her eyes went bright and her jaw tightened, and she pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment. And Cole understood he was watching a woman who had been right all along, discover the proof of it after 14 months of fighting alone, and feel the full weight of that all at once. He did something then that surprised both of them. He put his hand over hers on the desk. Just that. No words. She looked down at his hand. Then she looked up at him, and she did not pull away. "We need to get this to your attorney today," she said. Her voice was steady again almost. "I'll wire him this morning," Cole said. He did not move his hand. "Evelyn." "Don't say it's going to be all right," she said, quietly. "I can't hear that right now. I need to think." "I wasn't going to say that," he said. "I was going to say that Thomas would be proud of you." She looked at him for a long moment. The brightness in her eyes didn't disappear, but something shifted behind it. The grief and the exhaustion and the long, relentless forward motion of a person who had refused to stop all of it visible for just a moment before she brought it back under her own authority. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. Cole withdrew his hand. He stood up. "I'll send the wire," he said. "You draft the formal statement for the attorney. I want everything documented before we make another move." "Yes," she said. He walked to the door, stopped, did not turn around. "You've been fighting this alone for 14 months, he said. "You're not alone anymore." He went to send the wire. Behind him in the study, Evelyn Hart sat with her husband's ledger and the unsigned letter and the documented proof that she had been right every step of the way, and she let herself feel for exactly as long as she needed to. Everything she had been holding at bay since the day Thomas died. Then she picked up her pen and went to work, because that was who she was. And Cole Mercer, who had spent 6 years convinced that no one was worth the risk of knowing, had spent 26 days watching her be exactly that, and was running out of arguments for why that shouldn't change everything. Cole's attorney, a sharp-minded man named Douglas Fenn, who had practiced territorial law for 22 years and had the scar tissue to prove it, arrived at Blackstone Ridge on a Saturday morning with a leather case full of documents and an expression that Cole recognized as the professional equivalent of a held breath. Fenn sat down at the kitchen table, read the anonymous letter twice, read Evelyn's formal statement 3 times, and then set everything down and said, "Do you understand what you have here?" "Criminal fraud," Cole said. "Destruction of legal records. That's the floor," Fenn said. "If we can corroborate the letter, if we can find one verifiable piece of external evidence that Thomas Hart's loan was repaid, and the record destroyed, Hale isn't looking at a civil dispute over a fraudulent lien. He's looking at a criminal indictment." He looked at Evelyn. "Mrs. Hart, the ledger entry you mentioned. Thomas's notation of the final payment in March 1886. Do you have it?" Evelyn opened her satchel and produced the ledger without a word. She had already marked the page. Fenn read it, looked at the date, looked at the amount, and looked up. He wrote the payee as HLL. "Hale Land and Lending," Evelyn said. "I know that now. At the time I found it I didn't recognize the initials, and I had no account paperwork to match it to because the account had been destroyed. I thought it might be a different note entirely." "It's your corroboration," Fenn said. He said it with the quiet gravity of a man who understood the weight of what he was looking at. A contemporaneous record in the deceased's own hand, recording a payment to Hale's company at the precise time the anonymous letter claims the account was closed and destroyed. He paused. "This is enough. Not to guarantee a verdict, nothing guarantees a verdict, but enough to take to the territorial prosecutor and make a credible case for criminal investigation." The kitchen was very quiet. Evelyn said, "How long will that take?" "The investigation, months potentially. But the civil counterclaim in September doesn't wait for the criminal process. We go into that court session with everything we have. The original lien documentation, the ledger entry, the anonymous letter as corroborating context, and the discredited Whitmore land grant. We present Hale's pattern of conduct across multiple properties." Fenn looked at Cole. "And we present Blackstone Ridge as evidence that Hale's operation extended beyond Mrs. Hart to a coordinated scheme targeting multiple landowners. That changes the character of the case. It's no longer a widow fighting a disputed debt. It's a pattern of organized fraud." Cole looked at Evelyn. She was sitting very straight, her hands flat on the table, her eyes on Fenn with the concentrated attention of someone absorbing every word and calculating simultaneously. He had seen that look for 30 days, and it still struck him the same way, the combination of intelligence and discipline, and the absolute refusal to be less than fully present in the moment that required her. "Do it," Cole said. "All of it. Whatever resources it takes." Fenn nodded. "I'll need 3 days to draft the full filing. I'd like Mrs. Hart available for questions during that time." "She's available," Cole said. Evelyn glanced at him. Something in her glance said she noticed he had answered for her, and something else in it said she didn't mind. The 3 days Fenn worked were the strangest and most clarifying days Cole could remember in recent years. The ranch ran its usual operations, cattle fencing, the summer work that didn't stop because a man had legal troubles, and he moved through his days the way he always had, except that now there was a current running underneath everything. A low awareness of Evelyn's presence that had become so constant, he had stopped being surprised by it, and started simply accepting it as a feature of how the world currently worked. She was up before him every morning without fail. She was at the desk by 6. She answered Fenn's questions with precision and without elaboration, giving him exactly what he needed and nothing wasted. She ate dinner with Cole and Hank, and sometimes Joseph. When Joseph chose to join them, and she participated in the conversation with the ease of a woman who had found her footing in a place and stopped being careful about taking up space. On the second evening, Hank made a comment about the supply contracts for fall, and Evelyn offered an observation about the pricing structure that made Hank look at her and then look at Cole with an expression that said plainly, "She's good, boss." The same thing he'd said in the stable weeks ago, but with more emphasis now, more certainty, more of the particular approval that Hank reserved for people who had proven themselves over time, rather than just at first impression. After dinner that night, when Hank had gone to the bunkhouse and Fenn had retired to the spare room and the house was quiet, Evelyn stayed at the kitchen table with her tea, and Cole stayed with his coffee, and neither of them moved to leave. "You've been thinking about something," she said. "Not an accusation, an observation." "I think about a lot of things," he said. "You've been thinking about something specific, and you've been deciding whether to say it for approximately 4 days," she said. "I've been watching you decide. Cole looked at her across the table. You've been watching me decide. You have a tell, she said. You go still. Most people go still when they're not thinking. You go still when you're thinking very hard about something you're not ready to say. I was quiet for a moment. Charlotte Pierce, he said. Her name was Charlotte Pierce. We were engaged to be married in the spring of 1881. She left in February. She had been... He paused, finding the words for something he had not put into words in 6 years. There was another man, a business associate of her father's from St. Louis. She had known him before she knew me, and she... He stopped. She chose not to tell me that when she accepted my proposal. She let me build a life around the assumption that she intended to share it. And then she didn't. Evelyn was very still, listening. I was not broken by it, Cole said carefully. I want to be accurate. I was recalibrated. I understood something I hadn't understood before, which was that I was capable of being thoroughly wrong about a person I believed I knew completely. And I decided that the cost of being wrong that way again was higher than the cost of preventing it. So you closed the door, Evelyn said. I closed the door, he said. Every woman who came near Blackstone Ridge in 6 years had a clear view of that door from the outside. He looked at his coffee. You're the only one who didn't try to open it. Evelyn turned her cup in her hands. I told you when I arrived that I didn't come here for that. I know, he said. That's why I'm telling you this. She looked up at him. You didn't try to open the door, he said. You just went about your business, and the door opened anyway. He held her eyes. I don't know what to do with that. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the summer dark had settled over the valley, and somewhere out in it, a cricket was singing the same two-note song with the relentless optimism of something that had never been hurt and didn't know enough to be cautious. I buried Thomas 14 months ago, Evelyn said. And I haven't stopped moving since, because if I stop moving, I have to feel how tired I am. I've been running on anger and determination and the absolute certainty that Thomas deserved better than to have what he built taken apart by a dishonest man. She paused. I didn't come here looking for anything except ground to stand on. That was true. She met his eyes. It's still true. And it's all true that I have spent 30 days noticing things about you that I wasn't expecting to notice, and I don't know what to do with that either. Cole looked at her for a long time. Then we're in the same position, he said. We're in the same position, she agreed. Neither of them said anything else, but neither of them moved to leave, and the cricket kept singing, and the coffee went cold, and the kitchen held them both in the particular stillness that exists between two people who have finally said the true thing and are now simply sitting with the truth of it. Fenn left on Tuesday with a completed filing that ran to 41 pages and included as exhibits Thomas Hart's ledger entry, certified copies of the Territorial Archive documents, a cross-reference timeline of Hale's property acquisitions that demonstrated a pattern across 7 separate cases, and a formal request for criminal investigation addressed to the territorial prosecutor in Helena. September 14th, Fenn said at the door. Land Court, Dillon Creek. Be there at 8, and bring everything. We'll be there, Cole said. Fenn looked at him, then at Evelyn, then at Cole again with the expression of a man who had known Cole Mercer for 11 years and was observing something he had not observed before. He chose not to comment on it, which was one of the qualities Cole had always appreciated in Douglas Fenn. Good luck, Fenn said, and left. The week before the September court session was the week Victor Hale made his mistake. It came on a Wednesday as a formal letter delivered through Greer's office to Cole's attorney, a settlement offer structured as a withdrawal of the original lien against Twin Elk, in exchange for Evelyn dropping the counterclaim and signing a document agreeing not to pursue further legal action. The offer included a payment of $800 framed as compensation for inconvenience. Cole read it. Evelyn read it. And then Evelyn looked at him and said, "He's scared." "He's scared," Cole confirmed. The criminal referral reached Helena. Someone told him. "He's trying to make this go away before the court session," she said. "If he withdraws the lien and I sign that document, the whole case disappears. He walks away." "Yes," Cole said. Evelyn set the letter down. "I'm not signing it." Cole nodded. I didn't think you would. He destroyed Thomas's records, she said. Her voice had gone quiet and absolutely flat, which Cole had come to understand was more serious than anger. He manufactured a debt that didn't exist, filed a fraudulent lien against a grieving widow, and then sent a man to stand in my yard and measure the fence to make sure I understood I was being watched. $800 and a signed agreement not to talk about it. She paused. No, we draft the refusal today, Cole said. We reference the criminal referral directly. I want Hale to know we are not stopping. Draft it together, she said. I want my name on the language. They spent 2 hours on that letter, and when it was done, it was 9 paragraphs of precise, calm, legally grounded refusal that also happened to be in Cole's private assessment, one of the most quietly devastating documents he had ever read. Evelyn had a gift for language that worked not through emotion, but through the accumulation of specific, verifiable facts, arranged in an order that made their collective meaning inescapable. Reading her prose felt like watching a structure built piece by piece, until you suddenly understood the shape of the whole thing and could not unsee it. He told her that. She looked at him like she didn't quite believe him, and then looked at the letter again, and then said, Thomas always said I was too direct. Thomas was wrong about that, Cole said. She smiled, not the brief, surprised laugh from May's cafe, but something quieter and more settled. I was wrong about a few things, she said. He was right about most. Tell me something he was right about, Cole said. He wasn't sure why he asked, but he had come to understand that Thomas Hart existed between them as a presence that needed acknowledging, not avoiding a real man who had loved her and been loved by her and deserved to be spoken of with honesty rather than careful omission. Evelyn thought about it. He always said that the most dangerous thing a person could do was assume the best about someone who hadn't earned it yet, she said. He said that trust should be built like a fence, post by post, not thrown up all at once. Cole was quiet for a moment. He sounds like he was a careful man. I was, she said. He trusted slowly and completely. Once you had it entirely. She looked at the letter in her hands. Hale never understood that about him. He thought Thomas was easy to exploit because he was honest. He didn't understand that Thomas's honesty was backed by documentation and a wife who never threw anything away. Cole looked at her. At the woman who had kept every record for 8 years, who had built a legal case out of nothing, who had carried 14 months of grief and fight without putting it down once. At the woman who had sat across from him in a kitchen and told him the true thing and then stayed. Post by post, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Post by post, she said, equally quiet. And the fence between them, which had been going up for 37 days, settled into place with the particular solidity of something built right and built to last. The night before the court session, Cole could not sleep. He was not anxious about the hearing. The case was strong. Fenn was prepared, and the combination of the criminal referral and Hale's failed settlement attempt had already shifted the legal landscape in their favor. What kept him awake was something else entirely, something less practical and more persistent. I went to the kitchen at 2 in the morning and found Evelyn already there. She was sitting at the table with her tea and the stack of documents she had organized and reorganized 4 times in the past week, and she looked up when he came in without surprise. You too, she said. Me too, he said. He poured his coffee and sat down across from her, and they sat together in the 2 in the morning quiet of the kitchen, in the way that 2 people sit together when they have run out of the need to explain themselves to each other. After a while, Evelyn said, Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that what you've done here has mattered. She looked at him directly. Not just the resources, not just the legal support. You stood on that street in Dillon Creek, and you told Hale in front of witnesses that I was not alone. That mattered more than any of the rest of it. Cole looked at his coffee. You would have gotten there without me. Maybe, she said. Eventually. But eventually might have been too late, and alone might have broken something that I... She stopped. I've worked very hard not to be broken by this. Having someone in my corner made that easier. Cole looked up. You've been in mine too, he said. The supply fraud, the land grant research, the way you read people and situations, you've protected this ranch as much as I've protected your case. I want you to know I'm aware of that. Evelyn looked at him with the expression he had catalogued and named for himself. Over the past week, the recalibration, the stepping out of a category. But this time, there was something else alongside it. Something that had passed recalibration and arrived somewhere new. Cole, she said. Yes, when this is over, when the court session is done, and Hale is finished, and the legal pieces are in place, I need to decide what comes next. She held his eyes. I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly, not carefully. Ask, he said. Do you want me to stay? She said. Not as an employee, not as a practical arrangement, just here, at Blackstone Ridge, with you. The two in the morning kitchen held the question between them like it was made of something fragile. Cole set down his coffee. He thought about Post by Post, and Thomas Hart's wisdom delivered through the woman Thomas had loved, and 6 years of closed doors, and 37 days of watching a person be exactly and consistently who she said she was. He thought about Charlotte, and the lesson he had learned, and the difference between a lesson about not trusting and a lesson about who to trust. He thought about the word home and who had said it, and that he had not corrected her. Yes, he said. The word came out without hesitation, without the careful management he had applied to his own feelings for 6 years, without the defensive architecture that had held everything at a safe distance for so long. Just the true answer offered plainly. Yes, I want you to stay. Evelyn looked at him for a long, still moment, and then she reached across the table and set her hand over his, the same way he had set his hand over hers in the study weeks ago when the letter came and the composure broke. The same gesture returned. All right, she said. Then I'll stay. The cricket outside had gone quiet. The kitchen held just the two of them, and the early dark, and the sound of the ranch breathing around them, steady, solid, alive. Cole turned his hand over beneath hers. She didn't pull away. They stayed at the table until the first light came, not sleeping, not talking very much, just present together in the way that people are present when they have finally stopped being afraid of what the presence means. In 6 hours, they would walk into a courtroom and take Victor Hale apart, piece by piece, with documentation and witnesses, and 41 pages of airtight legal argument. They would do it together side by side, the way they had done everything for the past 5 weeks. But that was in 6 hours. Right now, there was just the kitchen and the coffee, and the early quiet of Blackstone Ridge, and Cole Mercer's hand, turned palm up beneath Evelyn Hart's, and everything that gesture contained, 37 days of building post by post into something neither of them had planned and both of them had needed. The light came up slow over the Montana Valley, and when it did, they were ready. The Beaverhead County Land Court convened at 8 o'clock sharp on a Tuesday morning in September, and every seat in the room was filled. Cole had not expected that. He had expected the usual thin attendance of a civil proceeding, a handful of interested parties, some legal observers, perhaps a reporter from the County Gazette. What he found instead was a room packed with ranchers, merchants, and townspeople who had apparently decided without coordination or announcement that this particular hearing was worth showing up for. He recognized Erickson from the Merchants Association in the third row. He recognized 2 of the ranchers who ran spreads south of Dillon Creek. He recognized May from the cafe sitting with her arms folded like a woman who had come to see justice done and intended to make sure it was. He leaned toward Evelyn as they took their seats beside Fenn and said quietly, "Did you know about this?" "No," she said. She was looking at the room with an expression that was startled and moved and carefully controlled all at once. "I didn't." "Dillon Creek showed up," he said. She looked at him. "For you," she said. "For both of us," he said. Fenn spread his documents across the table without comment, which was what Cole paid him to do. Across the aisle, Greer was doing the same, and Victor Hale sat beside him, with the composed, faintly bored expression of a man who had sat in enough courtrooms to know how to look like he wasn't worried. But Cole had been watching people for 38 years, and he could see the tension in Hale's jaw, and the way his right hand was very still on the table, the careful stillness of someone who had instructed himself not to fidget. Hale was worried. He was just very good at not showing it. The presiding judge was a circuit judge named Beaumont, who had ridden up from Butte for the session, and had the particular impartiality of someone who owed nothing to anyone in the room. He called the proceeding to order, reviewed the filings, and said, "We have a counterclaim, an original lien 3 exhibits filed by the claimant, and a notice of criminal referral to the territorial prosecutor. This is going to be a full morning. Let's begin." Greer opened for Hale with the smooth efficiency of a man who had done this many times, establishing the original loan documentation, questioning the chain of custody on Evelyn's records, casting the entire counterclaim as the emotional response of a grieving widow who had misread her late husband's financial affairs. He was good. He was very good. Cole watched 2 of the ranchers in the gallery shift uncomfortably, and he felt Evelyn go still beside him. Then Fenn stood up. Douglas Fenn did not have Greer's polish. He was a plain-spoken man who believed that the clearest path between a fact and a listener was a straight line, and he walked that line for 40 minutes without ornament or drama. He presented Thomas Hart's ledger entry. He presented the certified copy of the Territorial Archive document. He presented the timeline of Hale's 7 previous acquisitions, each one following the same pattern, each one involving a fraudulent lien against a property owner in financial distress. He presented Hale's own company records subpoenaed through the criminal referral process, which showed a systematic pattern of account destruction across multiple cases. And then he presented the anonymous letter. "Your Honor," Fenn said, "the defense will argue that an unsigned letter has limited evidentiary value. That is technically correct. What the letter does is provide context for a pattern that is amply documented through independent sources." The author of this letter, whose identity we have not yet established, described the destruction of Thomas Hart's loan repayment records in March of 1886. Thomas Hart's own ledger written in his hand, and dated the same month, records a final payment to an entity he identified as HLL, Hale Land and Lending. The payment amount matches the loan amount precisely. He paused and let that settle. That is not a grieving widow misreading her husband's finances. That is a contemporaneous record corroborating the account of criminal fraud. The room was very quiet. Greer was on his feet immediately, with 3 procedural objections. All of them technically sound. All of them. The kind of delaying tactic that worked when a judge was susceptible to exhaustion, and didn't work when a judge was not. Beaumont heard each one with the patience of a man who had heard them all before, and overruled 2 and sustained 1. And the net effect was that Fenn's presentation remained largely intact. Then Beaumont said, "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Hart directly." Greer objected. Beaumont overruled him without pausing. Evelyn stood up. Cole watched her walk to the front of the room and turned to face the judge, and he thought about the woman who had knocked on his door 6 weeks ago. Drenched, exhausted. $43 to her name, holding her satchel with both hands like a person who had made peace with being tired. She was the same woman. She was also entirely not the same woman, or rather, she was more fully herself, standing in her own authority in a room full of people with 14 months of work and 6 weeks of partnership behind her and not a single thing left to hide. She testified for 22 minutes. She did not appeal to sympathy. She did not perform distress. She presented facts in chronological order, cited her documentation by exhibit number, and answered every question Greer put to her on cross-examination with the precise, measured clarity of someone who had anticipated every possible challenge and prepared for each one. When Greer attempted to suggest that her counterclaim was motivated by personal animosity toward Hale, she said, "My motivation is accurate accounting. The lien claims a debt that was repaid. The records proving that repayment were destroyed by the lender. I want the accurate record restored. That's not animosity. That's arithmetic." Someone in the gallery laughed. It wasn't disrespectful. It was the laugh of recognition of a room full of people hearing something true, said plainly. Greer sat down. Hale leaned toward him and said something in a low voice. Greer shook his head slightly. Cole saw that exchange and felt the first real certainty settle into his chest. They were losing, and they knew it. Judge Beaumont called a recess at 10:30 and reconvened at 11. When he returned, his expression had the specific quality of a decision already made, which Cole had learned to read in the faces of men who held authority and used it honestly. "I've reviewed the full filing," Beaumont said. "I want to address the Whitmore land claim first, as it is the simpler matter. The original 1879 territorial grant document, as certified by the territorial archivist, describes a parcel that does not include the southeastern section of Blackstone Ridge. The altered filing that forms the basis of the Whitmore claim was produced in 1883, 4 years after the original, and the alteration is not consistent with the original surveyor's notation or the boundary markers established at the time of the original grant. That claim is dismissed. Cole heard Evelyn let out a breath beside him. Regarding the Hart lien, Beaumont continued, I find the counterclaim substantially supported by the documentation presented. The ledger entry of March 1886, the pattern of conduct established across multiple prior Hale land and lending acquisitions, and the absence of any original loan documentation from the lender, which the defense has been unable to produce, and which the criminal referral suggests was deliberately destroyed, are collectively sufficient to invalidate the lien as filed. He looked at Hale directly. Mr. Hale, this court is not the venue for criminal proceedings, and I make no determination today about criminal liability. What I will say is that the referral to the territorial prosecutor is noted in the record of this proceeding and will remain there. Hale's composed expression did not break. But something behind it did, something small and structural, like a beam giving way inside a wall where no one could see it. Cole watched it happen and felt no satisfaction, only the clean, uncomplicated recognition of a thing being set right. The lien against Twin Elk Ranch is hereby vacated, Beaumont said. The counterclaim is granted. The property record will be corrected accordingly. He set down his papers. We're adjourned. The room did not erupt. It did something quieter and more genuine, a collective exhale, a murmur that was warm rather than loud. And then Erickson started clapping, and 3 other people joined him, and then the sound built itself into something real. May was on her feet. 2 of the ranchers from the south were shaking hands with each other as though they had won something themselves, which in a way they had, because what Hale had done to Evelyn, he had done, or would have done to others, and the room understood that. Fenn shook Evelyn's hand, and then Cole's, and said, "Well done," which from Douglas Fenn was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Evelyn turned to Cole. She was not crying. She was too composed for that, or perhaps too tired, or perhaps she had already processed the grief and the fight and the relief in the 2 in the morning kitchen, and this was the public version, which she kept quieter. But her eyes were very bright, and her chin was up, and she looked at him with the full weight of everything the past 6 weeks had been, and said, "We did it." "You did it," he said. "I just held the door open." She shook her head. "Post by post," she said. "Post by post," he said. The twist came 3 days later, and it was the last one. The anonymous letter writer identified himself. He came to Blackstone Ridge on a Thursday afternoon. A man in his mid-40s named Gerald Pruitt, who had worked as a clerk for Hale Land and Lending for 9 years before resigning in August after watching the Hart case progress and concluding finally, and at considerable personal cost, that he could not keep silent. He sat at Cole's kitchen table with his hat in his hands and told Evelyn directly that he had been the clerk who processed Thomas Hart's final loan payment in March of 1886, and that he had been instructed by Hale's office manager to pull the account and remove it from the active records. "I didn't know what they were going to do with it," Pruitt said. He was a thin man with the look of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. "I thought it was a filing reorganization. It wasn't until I saw the lien filed against your property in 1887 that I understood." He looked at his hat. "I should have come forward sooner. I know that." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Cole watched her decide. Something watched the calculation move through her face, the weighing of anger against pragmatism, of what this man deserved against what would serve the actual outcome. "You're willing to testify," she said, "to the territorial prosecutor." "Yes," Pruitt said. "That's why I'm here." "Then you came at the right time," she said. "Even if it wasn't the soonest possible time." She paused. "I'm not going to tell you it doesn't matter that you waited. It does matter. Thomas deserved better. But what you're doing now also matters, and I'll make sure the prosecutor understands that you came forward voluntarily." Pruitt looked at her with the expression of a man who had expected and perhaps deserved anger, and had received instead something more complicated and more dignified. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "your husband was an honest man. I'm sorry for what was done to his name." "His name is clear now," she said. "That's what counts." After Pruitt left, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. Cole sat across from her and let her have the quiet, which was what she needed, which he understood by now, without having to ask. After a while she said, "It's really over." "It's really over," he said. She looked at him. "Thomas is clear. The ranch is clear. Hale is going to face a criminal proceeding and Whitmore is done in Beaverhead County." She said it the way a person inventories something they have been holding for a long time and can finally set down. "It's over." "Yes," Cole said. She was quiet again. Then she said, "I don't know how to not be fighting." I understood that. He understood it more precisely than he could have articulated, because he had spent 6 years in his own version of that state-defended armored moving through his life in permanent readiness for the next thing that would require him to hold his ground. He knew what it felt like when the fight was over and the armor was still on, and you didn't quite know how to take it off. "You learn," he said, slowly. "It takes longer than you think and less time than you fear." She looked at him. "Is that what you did after Charlotte?" "Eventually," he said. "I made the mistake of keeping the armor on for 6 years longer than I needed it." He held her eyes. "I don't recommend that approach." The edge of her mouth moved. "Noted," she said. They were married in the spring, not a large ceremony. Neither of them wanted that. And when Cole asked Evelyn what she wanted, she said something honest, which told him everything he needed to know. They married in the Dillon Creek Church on a Saturday in April, with Hank as witness, and Joseph present in the back pew with his hat on his knee, and Margaret Aldous in the front row, looking pleased with herself in a way that was completely unjustified and entirely accurate, because it had been her suggestion that had set all of this in motion, and she was not the kind of woman to forget that. Judge Alderman performed the ceremony. It was brief and specific and real, which was exactly what both of them had wanted. Afterward, on the porch of Blackstone Ridge, while Hank and the hands sat around a fire, and Joseph produced food in quantities that suggested he had been planning this considerably longer than the official engagement, Cole and Evelyn stood together and looked out at the April Valley green, coming back into the grass after the long Montana winter, the mountains still carrying snow at their peaks, the late afternoon light moving slow and gold over 14,000 acres of land that was now theirs. "I want to talk to you about something," Evelyn said. "On our wedding day," Cole said. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she said. "The Hands children. There are 11 families on this ranch, and not one of them has a school closer than Dillon Creek. Davis's youngest can't make that ride in winter. Hank's nephew has been reading off the same 2 primers for 3 years. She looked at him. "I want to start a school, not a formal building, not yet. Just a room, a teacher, a regular schedule. 3 days a week to start." Cole looked at her. At this woman who had walked onto his porch 6 months ago with nothing but her own competence and her refusal to be beaten, who had dismantled a corrupt land operation, reorganized his supply chain, identified a $900 fraud, and sat with him in a kitchen at 2 in the morning, and said the truest things he had heard in years, and who was standing on their porch on their wedding day, already thinking about what needed to be built next. "The room off the south barn," he said. "It's not being used. Good light in the mornings." She looked at him. "You're not even going to think about it." "I thought about it the moment you said it," he said. The answer was obvious. She smiled, the real one, the unguarded one, the one that changed her face entirely, and that he had been accumulating and would spend the rest of his life looking for reasons to see. "We'll need a teacher," she said. "Right to the normal school in Helena," he said. "We'll pay a proper salary." "I'll write Monday," she said. "Write Sunday," he said. "We're efficient people." She laughed, and he put his arm around her, and she leaned into him with the ease of someone who had finally, after a very long time, found solid ground and knew how to stand on it. The fire crackled behind them. Hank said something that made Davis laugh. Joseph appeared in the doorway, looked at the two of them, nodded once with the satisfaction of a man who had seen this coming since approximately day 4, and had been patient enough to wait for everyone else to catch up. The April evening settled over Blackstone Ridge, warm and unhurried, full of the particular peace that belongs to places where honest work has been done and honest lives are being built. Cole Mercer had spent 6 years convincing himself that the closed door was the safe door, that keeping people at distance was wisdom rather than fear, that the walls he had built were protection rather than prison. He had been wrong, and it had taken a woman with $43 and a satchel full of truth, and the absolute refusal to beg for anything to show him exactly how wrong he had been. Evelyn Hart had not tried to melt him. She had not performed warmth or engineered affection or worked to dismantle what he had built. She had simply arrived and worked and told the truth, and stayed post by post, day by day, until the walls he had built with such care had become not a barrier between them, but a foundation beneath them both. And on a Saturday in April, with the Montana spring coming green and unhurried over 14,000 acres, Cole Mercer looked at his wife and understood something he had been learning slowly for 6 months, and now knew completely that the right person doesn't break down your walls. They make you wonder quietly, and then not so quietly, why you ever needed them at all. Blackstone Ridge had always been his. Now, finally, it was home.